And we're on now? Okay. I call to order this meeting of the Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, December 21st. And we will begin with Councillor Ma providing the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mayor. We are gathered here for our last council meeting of 2021 on the winter solstice, which marks the longest night of the year. And I can't help but ponder that on this darkest night, what our Indigenous neighbors have endured for so long. This past year, as evidenced by the unmarked mass graves in residential schools, 215 children in Kamloops, 751 unmarked graves at Merivale Residential School in Saskatchewan, the tormented passing of Joyce Echequan, the rise of the Land Back movement, all clearly highlight generations of systemic racism and purposeful harm. We have many wrongs to right. But I also find the winter solstice is a day of optimism, because by extension, it means a turn towards steadily longer days, a shift to brightness, a desire to be better. We have significant challenges ahead, big decisions, trying times, lawsuits. These are all tests on whether we can hold the frame of truth and reconciliation within our hearts. The micro represents the macro, and the things that we do here in Canmore at our local level form the bigger picture. I have hope in this council, this administration, this community that we're committed to making a difference. I am indebted and grateful to live vibrantly upon the land of the Treaty 7 people, the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Yahe Nakota Nations, Chiniki, Bearspaw, Wesley, and the Métis Nation, Region 3. In the spirit of change, I commit to seeking truth and reconciliation with you all. May we shine light on darkness together.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll now turn to the agenda for today's meeting. And I'm going to move its approval, but then I'm going to make an motion adding Councillor McCallum's report. So I move approval of the agenda for December 21st, 2021, Committee of the Whole. And I'm going to bring an amending motion that Councillor McCallum's report to the Committee of the Whole be included within item E1. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Now returning to the main question, moving approval for the agenda of December 21st, 2021, Committee of the Whole meeting as amended. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now looking to the item C, minutes of the November 16th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. On to item D1, 2021 Living Wage Report. Ms. Brown, welcome.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. So good afternoon, Mayor, members of Council. I'm here today to present on Canmore's 2021 Living Wage Report. So the living wage is a community-specific indicator of affordability. It represents the approximate income that a two-child family must earn to meet their basic needs and maintain a safe, decent standard of living within their community. Canmore's living wage is $37.40 per adult per hour. So today I will be providing Council with a brief overview of the 2021 Living Wage Report, including how the living wage was calculated, and I'll also share with you some potential future direction for the Alberta Living Wage Network, including the Living Wage Employer Program. The Canmore living wage was calculated based on the Alberta Living Wage Network methodology. The methodology estimates household expenses through a combination of population-level statistics and local community expenses. It's standardized across Alberta, which means that all municipalities who are part of the network calculate their living wage using the same methodology. And this standardization is key. Prior to creation of the Alberta Living Wage Network, every municipality used a different methodology, which meant prior to the network, we couldn't really compare our living wage to other communities' living wage. In addition, through the network, members also focused on making sure that the assumptions were research-based. Now, having said that, they were always research-based, but the network focused on making sure the research was more robust and consistent with other provincial networks. The network also researched tax and benefit programs and incorporated these programs into an interactive web-based calculator. And lastly, as recommended by the Canadian Living Wage Framework, the living wage expenses are based on a two-income, two-child reference family. When I talk about the living wage, one of the key questions that I get is why use a reference family? And there are many unique situations and circumstances, all with different expenses. For instance, I grew up in a two-parent, two-child family, but both my parents were disabled, which has different limitations and expenses. The key thing to remember about the living wage is that it's a population-level estimate based on averages. According to Statistics Canada from 2016, the average child lives in a two-parent family, and the average fertility rate is 1.5 rounded up to 2, so two-income, two-child family. So a reference family is used not because all people fit into this category, but because it represents an average household experience. So how is the living wage calculated? To calculate the living wage, we add up average expenses for a family of 4 who live a modest standard of living, and then we calculate the income that this household would need once benefits and taxes are incorporated. In Canmore, average annual household expenses for a family of 4 that has a modest standard of living is $113,000. Expenses include shelter, food, clothing and footwear, transportation, childcare, healthcare, tuition, other household expenses, and a contingency, 2 weeks' pay. To cover these expenses, a family of 4 must earn $136,000. This equates to each parent earning at least $37.40 and working 35 hours a week. One key thing to note, and this impacts affordability significantly, is that Canmore's living wage family pays $28,000 in taxes and receives only $6,000 in government benefits. And why is this important? When the network was calculating living wages for municipalities across Alberta, it was clear that provincial and federal benefit programs, in particularly the Alberta Child Care Subsidy Program, had a significant impact on affordability. We found that as living wage increased, the amount of benefits that a living wage family could access decreased. So in Canmore, the living wage family pays $28,000 in taxes and receives $6,000 in benefits. But for a community that has a living wage of $20 per hour, that family would pay $8,000 in taxes as opposed to $28,000 and receive $11,000 in benefits as opposed to $6,000. The average municipal living wage in Alberta is $21 per hour. Canmore is an outlier. This graph shows how Canmore compares to other municipalities. As you can see, Canmore has the highest living wage in Alberta. Where most communities have a living wage between $15 and $20 per hour, Canmore is over $37 per hour. Each of these communities have calculated their living wage using the Alberta Living Wage Network methodology, so these numbers are comparable. But this story is not new for us. Since Canmore has first completed the living wage, we have always been one of the highest living wages. This chart is from the 2018 Canmore Community Monitor Report, and it shows our living wage in comparison with other municipalities. And as you can see in 2018, Canmore's living wage was higher than Calgary and some BC communities as well. Now, this isn't a fair comparison because they do use different methodologies, but it kind of gives you an idea. In Canmore, our living wage has been increasing, and although some of the change is due to methodology, which I've outlined in the 2021 Living Wage Report, some of it is due to increased expenses. And I realize I've just painted a very grim picture. Canmore's expenses keep going up, but our local wages aren't able to keep up with these expenses. In addition, many of these expenses, if not all, are out of our control. For instance, the housing market is booming across Canada. And according to the Bank of Canada, location is a new driver of growth as individuals are working remotely and purchasing homes in rural and desirable communities. The cost of food is also increasing across the province in Canada. The 2021 Canada Food Price Report forecasted food price increases of between 3 to 5%. And the 2022 one that was just released in December has forecasted food price increases between 5 and 7%. So what can be done? Or the real question is, who is responsible for creating an affordable Canmore? In the 2021 Canmore Living Wage Report, I argue that community affordability is a shared responsibility between community, business, and all levels of government. And although there is no simple solution that will fix Canmore's affordability issue, there are a variety of potential solutions that can impact affordability. So my apologies, this is a bit of a busy slide, but the purpose of this slide is to highlight the impact of community programs. Canmore's living wage is $37.40. But if a family were to access local food programs or Canmore's Community Housing Vital Home program, or purchase their clothing and footwear at our local Crossway community thrift store, those expenses are reduced and the income needed to cover these expenses is less. In this example, a family was able to access a variety of food programs, the Vital Home Ownership Program, and use the thrift store. As a result, each working parent needs to earn $26.17 per hour as opposed to $37.40 to cover their expenses. It is important to note that because of program availability and individual circumstance, not all individuals will have access to all of these programs. But what we do know is that these programs are impactful. All levels of government have an important role to play in community affordability. Government investment in tax and benefit structures all impact community affordability. For example, as a result of the National Housing Strategy, the Government of Canada committed an additional $2.5 billion in new funding to support housing programs. All levels of government have invested in both local housing initiatives and public transit. Recently, the province announced a federal-provincial childcare agreement, where starting in 2022, some childcare expenses may be reduced by 50%. This would result in Canmore's living wage being reduced from $37.40 to $33.62 per hour. Other benefits that have impacted affordability within Canmore include the Canada Child Benefit. A living wage family receives just over $4,000 in Canada Child Benefit, and the Climate Action Incentive. A living wage family receives just over $1,000 from the Climate Action Incentive Program. And employers also have a role in community affordability. Now, the living wage program is not meant to direct wages, but instead meant to be a tool to help employers maintain a sustainable workforce. Remuneration should never be based on lifestyle or family composition. There are many factors that an employer needs to consider when determining employee compensation. Employee compensation is a combination of both benefits and wages. Employee benefits can reduce an employee's expenses, which in turn increases the impact of that compensation. Through the living wage calculator, we can calculate total compensation by incorporating benefit programs into an employee's wage. This is key. The key is that the benefit program has to reduce the employee's expenses. So for example, if an employer were to provide a comprehensive health benefit package to their employees, that employee would no longer need to cover and purchase Alberta Blue Cross, which is a living wage expense. So as a result, that employee does not need to allocate dollars to healthcare. So this chart is an example of a collection of benefit programs that an employer may offer. The Job Resource Centre lists the average wage in the Bow Valley as $19.11. So I used $19.11 as the employee wage in this example. So in this example, the employer offered their employees several benefit programs. And although the employee's wage is $19.11, their total compensation when you factor in all these benefit programs, increases to $22.69. So what happens next? The Alberta Living Wage Network is working with other provincial networks to explore a Canada-wide methodology and calculator. The hope is that by understanding Canada's economic landscape, we as a municipality will have the data we need to advocate for programs that have a demonstrated impact on affordability. My department will also continue to assess community programs and explore new programs that can increase affordability. For example, FCSS is working with Banff Canmore Community Foundation and Banff Community Services to strengthen the Bow Valley Civic Society sector. And my department, with the support of the Economic Development Department, will continue to work with the Alberta Living Wage Network on their employee wage program. Before ending my presentation today, I do want to provide you with a brief overview of the employee living wage program. It is draft still. So as I mentioned previously, the living wage is an indicator of community affordability as a whole. So expenses are based on average expenses for an average household, which is a two-income, two-child family. But when we look at wages across a working person's lifespan, we see that on average individuals earn less when they start their career, more as they advance their career, and then less again as they transition into retirement. Again, this is not all individuals, but averages. For our community to be sustainable and welcome individuals from diverse economic backgrounds, we need to have a community where, on average, an individual can earn and grow and thrive in their community. If an individual cannot earn enough to have a decent standard of living, there is a risk that individuals and families may move to a more affordable community, which may further decrease our economic diversity and impact our workforce sustainability and our community feel. So we worked with the Alberta Living Wage Network to understand what this median income curve might look like in Canmore, and we calculated the single adult wage and the amount that an individual who is renting without dependents would need to earn to have a decent standard of living in Canmore. And this represents an individual who is new in their career. So Canmore's single adult wage is $23.70 per hour. And with the support of the Alberta Living Wage Network, we created a median income curve for sustainable workforce for Canmore. And what we are saying is that for an employer to have a sustainable workforce, they need to compensate, which includes wages and benefits, all entry-level positions at least $23.70. An individual should be able to grow in their career and in their position to earn $37.40 per hour. And on average, an organization, all employees' compensation rates, when averaged together, should be above $28.55. $28.55 is a weighted average of both the single adult and the living wage. So the median income curve is the basis for the Alberta Living Wage Employer Program. And the town does not administer the Living Wage Employer Program. The program is administered by the Alberta Living Wage Network, but the network does ask for guidance from the town to ensure that the program is fair and fits our needs. So to recognize that an employer is a living wage employer, Canmore businesses and organizations need to demonstrate two things. They need to demonstrate that the average compensation across their organization is at least $28.50, and that no employee earns less than $23.70. The town will work with the network to finalize this employer recognition program. So in summary, the living wage is an indicator of community affordability, and it is not tied to specific individual or circumstance. Instead, it's a collection of population-level statistics and community expenses. Canmore has the highest living wage at $37.40 per adult per hour, and this represents the wage that a two-income, two-child family would need to earn to cover expenses and maintain a decent standard of living. Remuneration should never be based on lifestyle or family composition. There are many factors that an employer needs to consider when determining employee compensation. An individual wage is not stagnant across their career. On average, individuals earn less when they are young, more as they approach middle age, and less when they transition into retirement. And the amount that an individual needs to earn to start a career in Canmore is $23.70. Community affordability is complex, and there's no single solution that can solve the problem. Instead, community affordability is a shared responsibility between community, business, and all levels of government. Thank you very much for your time. Can I answer any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you, Ms. Brown, for the presentation. Would you be able to go back, potentially a couple slides, if we can go back up, just to the Canmore living wage, the last 4 years, just to that, yeah, that chart there. So with the last year, you said in your report that the 2021 living wage took in a 35-hour work week, but the prior years had a 40-hour work week. What would be the living wage if it was still on the 40-hour work week? Just because that jump looks really big, and so people just looking at this might be like, oh, wow, it got really expensive one year, but it went up, but just not that crazy because the metrics changed and all that stuff. So if you could just go into that a little bit more.
Yes. So we originally were calculating 40 hours a week because the idea was that there's almost an idea that you need to work more to make sure that you can escape poverty. But in reality, the average number of hours an individual works in Alberta is 36 hours per week, and all other provincial networks actually calculate their living wage on 35 hours a week. So if it was 40 hours a week, it's $32.73.
Thank you.
Good question. Other questions? Councillor Faubert.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Brown. You mentioned that the higher the living wage, the less access there is to benefits and programs at other levels of government. How do we change that? Easy question.
Well, I think that being able to show that, to demonstrate that is key. I think that elected officials have a very strong voice to be able to take that message. And then we work with other networks as well. You know, we work with the Family Community Support Services Alberta Association, and we talk about things like affordability. We work through the Alberta Living Wage Network and talk about affordability, Rural Development Network, and we try to paint that picture that affordability doesn't look the same in every community because of these different expenses.
Are there any communities in Alberta or Canada where a federal or a provincial program has a different thresholds due to the high cost of living?
Well, the only one that I can think of off the top of my head is the Fort McMurray and Northern Living Allowance. I'm not sure how it works out for resort-based communities in BC. I haven't looked into that.
And then I'm shared responsibility, absolutely. Totally agree with that. But who is, and apologies for the metaphor, the quarterback? Like who's running the play and perhaps putting the effort in to find new ways to maybe make it more affordable, or?
That is a good question, and I think it would change depending on where your perspective. So, you know, my perspective from community social development, I see that community programs have they offer a huge leverage for increasing affordability. The Vital Homes program, Food and Friends, all our food programs, Bow Valley Food Alliance, all of that. But they can only run with the support of community and government support. And people do still need to, we can all agree that there is a minimum wage that everybody needs to earn. So now it's what is that for Canmore?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. I always find this an interesting, like in terms of information, interesting and daunting presentation when we have it, because obviously the number continues to go up, and as municipalities, we in many cases have the least amount of effect on that number. For example, a federal income tax. And so for instance, if somebody's earning $18 an hour and they move to $19 an hour, prior under the well, and it's transitioning the childcare subsidy, the provincial childcare subsidy, they would actually lose their childcare subsidy by earning $1 more per hour from 18 to 19. And that's always, that makes me sad. So one of the levers that you listed for us was the Canada Housing Strategy, and the money that the federal government is putting into affordable housing, attainable housing, whichever word you want to use. We know that the provincial government has left $175 million, I believe, of that money on the table and chooses not to access those dollars. Is there a way for municipalities to go around the provincial government to be able to access those dollars? Have you seen any instances of that in Alberta?
I don't think I can answer that. I don't know. But it's interesting, I'm sure, to look into and have a discussion with other colleagues from other councils.
So the Alberta Senior Citizens Housing Association just sort of did a deconstruction of the provincial housing strategy that was just released. And it really, unless the provincial government puts money on the table, there is no housing strategy, especially since they're considering selling off of some of our affordable housing assets in the province of Alberta. And I'm sure Canmore's social housing assets are very attractive based on the dollar amount that they'll provide. And I guess I'm just wondering if there's another solution for us, because, you know, in terms of social housing in Canmore, our only solution is through Bow Valley Regional Housing and tapping into the provincial government through them, as they are the agents for them. But I'm wondering if there is another solution, because, you know, that's actually the income below the living wage number, well below the living wage number, that's really truly suffering in Canmore. And there has to be a way around. There has to be. So I was just wondering if you had seen any solutions or creative approaches or anything across your desk.
No, but I think being a part of the Rural Development Network is key to seeing that, and especially now that the Rural Development Network has expanded outside of Alberta. Kind of gives you perspective of what other communities are doing.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate your presentation, and there's a few things that you said that I'd just like to underline that really need to be received, hopefully, by the community. First of all, that living wage is an indicator. Living wage is not a direction to employers as to what they're supposed to pay. Mm-hmm. Living wage is also not saying to employees, this is what you have a right to earn. But what it is an indicator of affordability. Going to the quarterbacking question, I think that it really is a shared responsibility, and it's something that we all have, it's in all of our best interests to pursue. Individuals, they have a responsibility, if they want to be staying here, to look for those programs that are available that could meet their circumstances, recognizing that they won't all be eligible. For businesses, we've seen staff shortages. We've seen the difficulty in retaining staff and people moving away. Obviously, it's in the best interest of businesses to explore creative ways to gain benefits for their employees without necessarily having to pay the equivalent amount of a salary increase through these other programs. And as a town, we definitely have affordability programs to help people. We need to be putting more housing options out there, advocating to the provincial government to get a housing program and not to gut our social housing. We also need to continue to expand the frequency and reach of public transit. When these programs become available to everyone, then they can properly be taken into account in our living wage calculations. And the modality shift. If it's easier and safe for people to get around without means of a vehicle, that will help as well. So I think all of these things together, now that we are all calculating on the same basis, hopefully we'll start to see that needle move the other direction. And I really appreciate your work and bringing this forward to us. This is an important indicator, perhaps one of the most important indicators that we have as a community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ma? Oh. Councillor Graham, did you have something you wanted to add or a question?
Yes, thank you. I wonder, Ms. Brown, do you have any stats on Banff and its current living wage?
Banff doesn't complete a living wage, but they know that affordability is a huge issue in Banff as well. And I have worked with Banff's Community Services Department and showed them the living wage calculator, and I know they've explored it and they're thinking about it, but it's just not a road that they've come down. A bit difficult for them too, being in a park as well. They have some other things that doesn't quite fit into the methodology across the rest of Alberta, but I'm not sure of all the details of why they've chosen or not to.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Ma?
Thank you for this presentation, Ms. Brown. And Mayor Crouser, a lot of things what you said made a lot of sense. In 2023, as a call to all citizens in this province and in our community, there is a provincial election. Do get informed and inquire on which parties will perhaps be passing policies or and will address the issues that are most important to you. I know it's like, say, a personal anecdote. My child was in childcare at the time, and we were fortunate enough to be in the program that was subsidized. It was the pilot project, and it made a big difference for us that year. And with the passing of the election, the new government took great relish in taking that away. Just things for us all to consider as a community. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Brown. And Merry Christmas to you. We'll now move to item D2, Fire Rescue Annual Report 2021. Chief Gaylor, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Welcome.
I'm going to really miss her. Are we good to go, Mayor?
We are good to go.
Thank you very much. I have no presentation, which may come as a relief to some. Anybody who's worked with me for any length of time. But really, I wanted to thank Mayor and Council for the opportunity to present most of the 2021 statistics. You will get a refreshed report before I leave in the first week of January.
Yeah.
Good. So really, I'm just going to skim the report, and I just wanted to also create the opportunity to answer any questions that you may have and just give you a little update on your fire rescue service, if we're comfortable with that.
That sounds great.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to jump into the report that you may have in front of you. We're about to start our peak staffing protocol. We are just running the dispatch testing right now, and we're into that new protocol right now. And officially on January 1st, it is starting in on that with 3 on the truck 24/7. That allows us to change how we dispatch the truck and the amount of times we general page and bring our paid response staff in. We have to keep that number low enough to be sustainable. And it worked very well over the summer, and I thank Council for that and really look forward to this upcoming year with the peak staffing. You have a brand new rescue truck that is being outfitted right now. Council approved about 3 years ago. We expect to see it in service in February, end of January, start of February. A lot of excitement around that truck. That truck will serve the town for years very well. A great utility vehicle. And really the meat and potatoes of our agency is the staff. We were able to bring 8 new paid response firefighters onto the job this year, and they've settled in really well. In fact, they're some of our highest, as tends to be the case, some of our highest participation group right now. Really high quality people, very dedicated, very capable. And within our overall staff, we've had a number of promotions and lots of training going on as well. I was able to do an all-staff update a couple of days ago, and I thank you again, Mayor Crouser, for attending and bringing a few words on behalf of Council. That was great to see you there, and a really, really interesting evening. So lots have been going on throughout the year. The team has done very well. The capital projects, of course, are underway. Council approved self-contained breathing apparatus has been purchased and is in service, and they're good for another 10, 15 years. They're easily on that. That project worked out really, really well. And of course, we continue to work very closely with the facilities team on the new fire hall project, fire station project, which is very exciting. Really interesting and exciting piece is our fire prevention officer. The first line of defense for fire safety in any community is prevention and education. And council approved dedicated resource of a full-time fire prevention officer to really deal with that front end of community safety is underway, and I'm pleased to announce that we have 3 or 4 very interesting, capable candidates. The team, HR team, and Chief Martins is working on finalizing who may be the successful candidate, but some really interesting candidates there. So really excited about that. We hope to onboard that person January, February, depending on their schedule. Emergency management is very well handled. A lot has been going on, as you know, fire smarting and fuel reduction and what have you. Great exercise was just held recently, and of course, Chief Martins was very much involved in that as well. And just generally, calls for service continue to increase, and it's just a product of our community, which is growing rapidly. Which brings us to numbers, and I'm going to skim it because I really want to leave an opportunity at the end for questions. But we're seeing the same trends that we have for a number of years now. We're seeing, the report says 8.6% increase over last year. It's actually running closer to 9.5% when you see the final report. We're well over 700 calls anticipated. Again, I'll finalize that. We're definitely going to hit those numbers. So yeah, and it really, we don't see that as anything other than a product of population increase and visitorship to the valley. Simple as that. People drive calls for service. It's a very direct correlation. We speak quite a bit to the medical side of things, lots and lots of BLS calls. We are on scene roughly 65% of the time, and we average 7.5, 7:15 on scene before EMS is there. And, you know, we've started that conversation and happy to have it further. Just know that your team is there every time. And, you know, we get there first quite often. No commentary to HS, it's just that the team is there and they're a great backstop. They help stop the clock until the system can catch up. Sort of breaking down the calls, you know, I don't see any reason why the calls are not going to level off. I don't know how to level them off, short of closing the highway. So that's just a product of the environment. We're very much in line with other like-sized communities when you adjust for visitorship. So we're, in fact, slightly less, which you know, population-based comparators. The calls by category I broke out for you, again, those percentages are pretty consistent year over year. As you can see, medical makes up a big chunk of what we do, 42% of it. Alarms is in there, medical, fire, MVCs, fires, etc. The alarms calls are always an interesting one because how can we drive those numbers down? Those numbers are flat, interestingly. They're not going through the roof. So another aspect to that is that we're hopeful the fire prevention officer will drive those numbers down even more. There are a few levers we can pull in that category. But again, what drives alarms quite often is visitorship. Pull stations in hotels, Airbnbs, et cetera, et cetera. I broke out the fires. You know, a lot of people want to hear about fires. Interestingly, although it is a very small part of what we do, it's a very important part of the services provided. Again, not seeing any anomalies that cause big concern for me. Everything's relatively in line. We saw an uptick in wildland fires. Of course, we had one really big one. The rest of the categories are where we want them. Appliances and vehicle fires, they're down a little bit, which is great. Even fire pit calls were down a little bit, which was good. So there's not a real outlier in there that's causing us concern. Very typical of a community. Medical calls are what you would expect as well. Even in the AHS system, by far the majority of their calls are basic life support calls. And we see that in the fire response. Even though we only respond to what is considered to be serious or life-threatening events, by far the majority are basic life support calls, which we are around about 184 last year. Yeah, that's kind of it on the medical piece. And then just a quick chart on, to reiterate, how often we're on scene first and how long we're on scene before AHS arrives. That's just a really quick overview of where we're at. Before we sort of move to the questions part, I just wanted to leave you with a couple of thoughts. First of all, it's been a privilege to serve the town of Canmore. 4.5 years almost by the time I hang them up. After a 35-year career, it has been a brilliant opportunity to serve just a wonderful town. People have asked, looking back in your career, what stood out for you? And there's always the usual stereotypical responses, that one fire or that one save, etc. But the opportunity in Canmore really has been the capstone of my career. It has been the most challenging, the most rewarding, and the most growth-inducing 4-year period of a 35-year career. And to that, I thank council and senior town staff for providing me that opportunity, and the fire team to supporting me through this journey. So it's been absolutely brilliant, and I thank you for the privilege. But I want to talk a little bit about the team, just shooting from the hip. I leave knowing that the fire rescue team is extremely well-staffed, well-trained, and one of the most agile, dedicated, multi-skilled group of people I've ever worked for. Actually, I work for them. That is absolutely the fire chief's role. You work for them. I do have a lot of comparators around the province. I know a lot about a lot of fire departments. I've worked for another large one, and I know a lot about almost every municipality in Alberta and Western Canada generally, specifically Alberta. I can't think of a more dedicated, or more interestingly, how much they can do with so little consistently and so reliably and with so much passion. It is an amazing team. I know you know that, but I'm saying in comparison, because I see every agency, you're very, very well served. The citizens of the town are very, very well served by this agency. Right to our most junior paid responder to the most senior fire captain, it's in really great hands, and I have no doubt that will continue. The only thing I would add to that is my continuous plug is that we're doing a lot in a very efficient, very agile, very minimalist way. But the town is growing rapidly, the risk profiles are growing rapidly, the demands for call are growing rapidly. There will be the need for investment in that group of people. And I know council knows that, and I know there's a plan in place, and I just bring it to your attention that we need to consider that plan, can even consider looking at what those timelines look like. But the team's doing extremely well right now, but it's going to have to grow with the town. So with that, thank you again. This has been a complete pleasure. And I'd like to open it to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Chief. And just on that last point, we certainly are grateful for all the efforts of the fire department. And we know compared to other centers, we're smaller, but we punch above our weight. And that's in large part due to the quality of people we have and the quality leadership. So thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.
Opening up to questions on the presentation. And I love the stats and the graphs, by the way. So.
This is tip of the iceberg, sir.
Yeah. Councillor Faubert.
Okay. I have a few questions. Under emergency calls for service, when responding to medical calls, there's a sentence here, slight variances in reporting are due to the methods in which on-scene times are captured. What, is that last graph, or what does, I'm not quite sure I understand what that, do we have a different record of how often we arrive first than AHS?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, in a nutshell, yes. There are two dispatch centers. When you call 911, you go to a PSAP. It's basically the collection area for 911 calls. That happens to be Calgary 911, the dispatch center in Calgary. They then analyze the call and send it to AHS if it's a medical, and at the same time dispatch us because Calgary 911 is also Canmore's emergency response dispatch center. So AHS runs their own set of statistics. Now technically those numbers are pulled off the 911 call and the computer-aided dispatching and summaries that come out there. But I pull off our statistics all from Calgary 911 on the reports that they send through our records management system. I have noticed slight variances in how AHS calculates their on-scene times. And in fact, there may be some variances or perhaps even opportunities in EMS on whether or not they even track how long it's been before they're on scene. So I always like throwing that caveat in there. You may see some slight variances from other reporting bodies, if at all, but these are pulled directly off of our dispatch summaries that we receive for every call directly from Calgary 911. And it's all based on timestamps that are automatically computer generated as the call goes through its sequence.
Okay.
Another very slight variance for our crews, when they arrive on scene, they can hit a button on their computer or they can verbalize we are on scene. There is the occasional time, for lots of very reasonable reasons, that doesn't happen. It's rare, but sometimes it doesn't happen. Again, if it happens 1 in 30 times, it creates a very slight anomaly in the stats. I try to keep them as tight as I possibly can, but I like to always caveat in there. There will be the occasional time we didn't capture a data point.
Is it possible to track ambulance availability in our fire stats?
No.
Why not?
We have absolutely no optics on AHS, zero.
So when they ambulances get dispatched out of town, there's no heads up?
No,
It-
none.
So the information right now that Albertans have is just is coming from that?
Yes.
Is the campaign to raise awareness? And so
That-
we
the
have
whole-
no ability
yes,
to
yes.
raise our own awareness?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. In a nutshell, we have zero optics on AHS and EMS, and that's not Canmore, that's Alberta. They're completely, utterly separate systems. They don't talk to each other. They work extremely well together, boots on the ground. I want that absolutely clear. The teams providing the care work extremely closely together, and they, in Canmore particularly, work very well together. It's not always the case, but in Canmore they do. As far as the two organizations, the tracking, the accountability, et cetera, they're completely separate. And we have no more access to statistics than council would or a member of the public. They report their statistics in a very generalized way, as you know. And I don't know of a method that the town could use to track when they're down 1 ambulance, down 2, when they're out of valley, et cetera, et cetera. We have no way of getting to those statistics. So we operate, as the town of Canmore, we operate completely autonomously from that system. We do that under the guidance of council. You could choose to not go to medical aids tomorrow. It's absolutely within your rights. Some municipalities do. I would strongly, strongly recommend not doing that.
Yeah.
And there isn't a municipality this size where their fire department doesn't go. But it's just to illustrate the point where AHS may say that, oh, you know, municipalities are our partners. They're not. They're doing their thing under the provincial umbrella. We're doing our thing under the municipal umbrella. The only touch point is the medical first response program. They run a program of basic life support that fire departments that don't have the resources we do, mostly in staff expertise and a medical director, if they want some medical direction and guidance on how to provide basic life support system, they can join this medical first responder program and they get some guidance there. But again, I have several documents that make it clear from HS, you join voluntarily, you can leave whenever you want, and this is just an umbrella for you to use. But HS and the municipalities are very separate. So we have no optics. We know when it happens through social media like you folks do, and some of our staff, they work on both systems. So there's an informal reporting network, but nothing that I can report on officially, no.
I have one more question along this line.
Sure.
In our master fee schedule, we charge our neighboring jurisdictions for mutual aid or services. We have fees for service in the fire department. Would it be possible to estimate a fee for when we do provide a basic life support or advanced life support, just for knowledge?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we could work, if that was a direction of council, perhaps, okay.
Absolutely. It's a fairly easy statistic to calculate. You just take your number of medical aids, you look, well, it becomes interesting. But yes, it is. We charge a flat rate for a truck to our municipality, adjoining municipalities, if we're not in a first response agreement. So Banff's a good example.
Yeah.
If we go help Banff, we'll charge them per hour for a truck with 4 staff on it. We also have a fee schedule for a 2-owner truck and a smaller truck. We would take the fee schedule for a 2-person truck in a light-duty vehicle per hour, and then we would average a medical event at an hour and times that by 305, and there's roughly what that's costing you. Now, it's a good stat to illustrate to AHS maybe what it costs a municipality, but it's a little bit convoluted budgeting because it's already paid for. Because they're on standby for fire and all the other rescue calls. But as an interesting statistic, that's very easy to come up with that number. Yes.
Okay.
It's not the first time a municipality's asked that question. And actually, I'm sure there's an awareness in council, but when a municipality sort of indicates that there might be the opportunity for cost recovery, or this is what it's costing the municipality, my experience has been AHS's response is, well, just don't go. We're not asking you to. We're covering medical response for the community. So this is a really interesting, strategic, nuanced conversation that every council and every senior administration team and fire team is balancing. For me, it's providing the best level of service for our citizens and our visitors day in, day out. Unfortunately, I hate to kick this up, but it is purely a political position that needs to be taken.
Thank you. Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your service, and we'll be sad to see you go. Within the alarm category, is there a breakdown of false alarms? Because I'm sure there's times when alarm gets tripped, you guys get up there and nothing's happening.
Yeah, that's a great conversation. Sally's smiling. It can be broken down, yes. And what's really encouraging is that about 1.5 years ago, or 2 years ago, we initiated and executed a council-approved project to completely revamp our records management system. So now we can drill down into our numbers for the last 18 months, 20 months, a lot deeper. So I could probably break that out a little bit more. Where I trip over is what is a false alarm.
Yeah.
Because if the system acted the way it was supposed to, it's not a false alarm, or is it? And it becomes this nuanced question. If your kid runs by and pulls the pull station, there wasn't a fault in the system. It worked exactly how it's supposed to be. It's not a false alarm. It was an actual alarm. Was it an unintentional trigger? Maybe that's better language. Yes. If you burnt your toast, is that a false alarm? There was smoke, potentially could have been fire, and the alarm system acted exactly like it's supposed to. So it's hard to break that out. We could get into buckets where, yes, it was a kid pulling a pull station. Yeah, and then it gets really fuzzy. Another good one is opening a steam door, room in your steam room. And there it goes. Dust, sweeping parquets. Those are, if they're repeat offenders, we do have some levers that the fire prevention officer really is going to have the ability to leverage some of the tools we have in place already. I'm really optimistic about that. I think we're actually going to see a little bit of cost recovery of that position through that mechanism. But it's a stick you want to wield carefully.
Yeah.
Because most municipalities will give you a freebie or two. And then at some point, the rubber hits the road, right? But if you can be too punitive, and then you start getting things like alarms systems being pulled out and not putting back into service because they don't want to trigger the alarm. But then the downstream effect is if there actually is an event, there's no alarm system.
Yeah.
I've actually seen that happen. So I could get you slightly more nuanced numbers. The upside is that per population growth, the alarms aren't growing exponentially or with it, they're flattening a bit. So it's the only little bit of good news.
Yeah. No, I was just curious if there was times when you show up and it's, someone did pull the fire alarm, or basically nothing is happening. It just, got triggered,
Yeah.
and as it was supposed to, but
Yeah.
there was no need for, basically you show up and then make sure it's clear, and then you leave. So it's a shorter duration. Just curious, really.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to build on that a little bit, because a good majority of those alarms calls are just that. We get there, it's either nothing or something quite minor. Now, a really positive outcome of going with the peak staffing model, having 3 or 4 on the truck, is that we only have to send one truck. They investigate it and say, yeah, it was steam, it was a toaster, it was a kid, it was a whatever. And we don't general page. When we have the normal protocol and don't general page it, or do general page it, we have upwards between 6 and 13 people show up. That's a 2-hour minimum. It actually costs more to general page than it does to run an extra on the truck. You do the financial balance. If you run 1 alarms a day 2 alarms per 24-hour cycle. We're not that far off of that with other events. You're actually breaking even. So, yeah, and there's a large conversation around that. We balance it with industry best standards too. Industry best standards is to respond to alarms with a minimum of 4 people. I'm comfortable for this year running at 3. There has been in past, way past, can we do it in 2? That puts us so outside, it puts us in a little ice flow out in the middle of the sea, and that's not my recommendation. Yeah, but you're right.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
That's a very interesting conversation that I think in the coming year, and with the new chief in place, we should be taking a look at that balance. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm just going to ask a question here before moving to others that are waiting here. Just on the fire pit category, I'm curious, is there any sort of general MO with regards to those fire pits? Are they mostly complaint driven, or are they through some sort of inspection, or has there actually been any out of control?
That's a really great question, because it's different than in the city. I spent a career chasing fire pit calls, and they were always complaint driven by the neighbor. And it becomes a bylaw issue, and it becomes a relationship issue. Yeah. And it was exhausting. I mean, you only do that so many years. But I've noticed in Canmore, there is a few of those, but it is far more illegal fire pits. It is far more kids having a little fire up on the bluff. Kids, people, actually not even kids, anybody, having informal, non-compliant, not on private property fire pits. So of that bar, in that bar graph, you might say, I'd say at least half of those are that. And the other half are complaint driven, or somebody saw a fire and called it in as a fire, and we came and said, no, it's a fire ring, it's a fire pit. And then we coded as a fire pit what it actually is. Right. But interestingly here, it's more, and a good chunk of that is down to the visitorship. It's down to that. More of those are illegal, non-compliant fire pits rather than problems in neighborhoods. I mean, occasionally it happens, but rarely.
And would most of those be called in by a passerby that is, oh, there's a fire there and it shouldn't be there? So,
yes.
Okay.
Mostly passersby. And another thing too, Canmore has an extremely active community, always running and biking. So whereas a lot of metro trails, you might go an hour without seeing a human being. Here you got 2 minutes and somebody's walking by. So we do have a lot of, they tend to be just called in under those circumstances.
And I think that we're all attentive living in a valley full of trees.
Yes.
It's something in our best interest to make sure that we're safe, right?
We're happy to, the staff is there ready to go, and those definitely, even during the summer, we just sent the truck out without a general page. We're happy to go investigate. Can always redirect as needed. Councillor
Mera.
Thank you. Thank you for your update, Chief Kaler, sorry. Both my questions have been asked. Councillor Hillstead asked about pretty much the alarms and the frequent flyers, and thank you for addressing that. Our fire prevention officer will help address those. Mm-hmm. And the second one was the fire pits, and I just wondered if there was also an uptake because of COVID, but people having more fires, but you have just explained what's been going on there. And then lastly, I just have a comment. I know when we think of the fire department, I know when I used to, it's the first thing you think of is a fire. You don't think of all the other services that the fire department provides. So I just want to make sure that people know what it is. It's the Canmore Fire Department and Rescue Team. And I thank you for putting in, reaffirming, we already know, the confidence in your team and in our administrative team. And I would like to thank you for finishing up your long-time career in Canmore and leaving us on in good shape. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I appreciate that. Yes, it was a wonderful place to wrap it up. And I'd like to go back to that one comment you made, that it's one of the things that we very slightly changed our wording when I got here. The wording was in place, but I just really reinforced it. It's Canmore Fire Rescue Services. We're not fire department. Actually, we never have been here. Other municipalities have made that conscious change to from fire department to fire services, fire rescue services. And in fact, you could just argue you have Canmore Emergency Services, period. So thank you for that distinction, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Ma.
Okay. Thanks, Chief, for leading the team of heavy hitters. You're going to be missed. Quick question. I don't know if you have this off the top of your head. When we're talking about visitorship calls and resident calls, what would the percentage of those be visitor associated calls, if you had a guess?
Yeah, no idea. And
Okay.
I'm not being flip, Councillor, because this is a challenge with managing, I think, I'm kind of a data wonk as well. And I look for ways to collect data. And I don't know if we in Canmore have the best sets of tools, and Sally, please correct me if I'm wrong, to truly identify what constitute visitorship, how much it is, and what is triggering needs for service. Again, sort of like a false alarm. What is a visitor? Is it somebody enjoying their second property? Is it somebody renting an Airbnb for a month? Is it somebody driving through for the day? I mean, there's large buckets for sure, but it becomes a little bit nuanced when we respond to a medical event or a fire event or somebody to somebody's home and they're there 3 months a year. They're resident, I think, or are they visitor? But that all said, we have no way to break out, are you a visitor or are you a resident? We run into that a little bit with motor vehicle incidents. If you have a motor vehicle incident and it is not on the provincial highway in municipal, we do bill back to the insurance company and to the person for some cost recoveries, and we take the information. And maybe the thought has been there at one point, would there be different rates for visitors or residents? But again, what's a resident and what's a visitor? So your driver's license says Harvey Heights or Exshaw, or again, it's a little bit of a nuance in there. So that's a long way of answering. We have no way of telling who we're serving. I don't even really have a sense, quite honestly. I mean, short of, we could absolutely run a report on every medical and fire event we went to a hotel. I think that's pretty cut and dry. And that would be a relatively low number, percentage, you know, of any category of event. I'm going to just shoot it from the hip, 10, 15%, maybe.
Okay.
Everything else would be properties within our community.
Okay. Yeah, just curious about that sort of thing. Sometimes, you know, okay, well, there's a response issue. Someone's hiking, or they're a local hiker, someone from somewhere else. Another question you were elaborating, actually, could you elaborate a little bit more on some of the risk profiles you said were starting to escalate and some of the timeline things that we might need to start seeing around the corners for, just in case?
Right. That's a really interesting strategic looking forward piece. And again, we are quite keen on what we're seeing in the potential fire prevention officers, because that is going to be absolutely in that person's wheelhouse. What I see down sort of around the corner, where I see the risk profile slightly building, and we can offset it with strict fire code and compliance, et cetera, is density. Density creates calls for service. Density creates fires. Density creates multiple unit fires. It creates medical events, et cetera, just by the fact of the density. Access becomes an issue, et cetera. So interestingly, Canmore is running a near urban density in its footprint. I don't have the numbers right on the top of my head, but I think we're built on 4.1 square miles. And in that, we've got roughly 15,000 people. You do the math into that, and we're running at an urban or suburban density throughout. And now we have tracts of the town, which are pretty easy to see where that density is, and Kananaskis Way is one of them. But there's hidden density that I'm sure Lisa's team is aware of too and would speak to, where somebody owns a house, and they're on title as the house, but it's actually housing 6-8 people. That is a really typical scenario we see when we attend events. And most of those, quite often, those are informal residents. They're informal families. We've been to lots of apartments where we go and, you know, it would be typically an apartment you would house, say, 2 to 4 people in it, and there's 6 or 8. Or literally mattresses lined up in the beds, and they're flipping through depending on what shift you're on. So there's a hidden density that I think creates risk, and then the overt density, which we are intentionally building because it's good for a community. So managing that risk is something I think the next administration team really wants to focus on. A lot of that will revolve around the fire prevention officer and building that prevention piece.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Councillor Faubert?
Thank you. One note, I think we've never written a ticket under our false alarm bylaw, have we?
I do not know the answer to that. No, we have not.
So having a bylaw that we don't enforce, I get that there's concerns around, you know, how we enforce it, but I'm really looking forward to the fire prevention officer. And I get that part of the challenge on that was tracking that first warning, right? But that's just a comment as an aside. I did have a question, which is just delving into a bit, you might not actually know this, but in terms of the medical first responses that our fire department has done, what level of, or how often are you encountering overdose situations in our community, and how much of an issue is that? And do you have the naloxone kits available at the fire station?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can speak to that very, very quickly. No, I can't speak to anything quickly. I'm completely
You just
crushing
go
the
right ahead.
schedule.
We're here all day.
You know, this is my swan song.
I'll keep
Know
asking
thyself.
questions.
I love that. I'm going to miss this. Okay, so I'm intentionally having a bit of fun with it because I really do enjoy the conversation. I know you have a schedule. The false alarm, thank you. Yes, I completely agree. The false alarms thing, really excited that the fire prevention officer is the right place to go. I would just advise council to use that stick carefully because there is downstream effects. The overdose piece, I can pull the numbers. There's a slight uptick over the last 2 or 3 years. We're definitely seeing them. Been working with Family Support Services, Lisa Brown, on tracking that, and we've had informal meetings with RCMP as well of just the pulse of the community. Is there a drug problem in the valley? Yes, there's a drug problem everywhere in the province. Is it rampant? No. Is it linked to transient populations? To a degree, yes. Do we have overdoses, opioid overdoses? Yes. Is it epidemic? No. Is it endemic? Does it happen? Yes. We absolutely carry naloxone kits on all the fire trucks. We have injectables and inhalants and all the happy drugs, and we've had a lot of quick saves. We actually had a double overdose not terribly long ago, zapped them both, and they both came back. And it was just pure luck that the second person hit 911 before they passed out. So there's that, it's a little part of Canmore that's not wide band, but it exists of folks that are struggling, folks that are, have some challenges, folks that are underhoused, underemployed, drifting, trying to find, we see what we see, but there is a community underneath that has all the challenges that every community has. So, yep. Slight uptick, not too much though. Definitely in the valley.
And thank you again for your service here in the community and leading our Canmore Fire Rescue Services. I thought my last question, I'd end off with a bit of if you could look into your crystal ball and predict for us. I noticed by fire by category, garbage fires were higher last year than this year. What's on the radar for next year for garbage fires? Just as a metaphor for life.
It's
just as a metaphor for life.
50% increase. People burning garbage. Yeah.
But thank you.
My pleasure. It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Crowser. I got it right, yes. And thank you, Chief, for being our chief and for being my neighbor.
There you go.
Hopefully you're my neighbor for a while. I just wanted to tease some of what you were talking about hidden density versus the overt density. So when we're talking, can you elaborate a bit more about what you meant by the overt density and the fire code? You were talking about the fire code. So is that more like newer builds and how they would probably have sprinklering, et cetera,
Yes.
versus the older multifamily builds that don't necessarily have that kind of protection? Is that what
Yes.
you're referring to?
On the overt.
On the
or
overt density? Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. And then in hidden density, what we're really talking about is poverty.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're talking about people density, but we're politing that by using people density, but we're talking about people living in poverty and they are underhoused.
I think
And that's a risk.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how affordability has a risk within our fire department as well, in terms of our safety, community safety. That's a very interesting point, especially at Christmas.
Yes.
Anyways, I won't push anything more than that or ask any more questions. I've always enjoyed your statistics. I know you love showing them.
This was kind of minimalist, but thank you.
Yeah, I know. We talked about that at agenda review. But thank you for serving the people of Canmore and your fire department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Cottle, did you have something? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. I just wanted to add my voice to say thanks to the chief. As you all know, he only has 2.5 weeks left with a little bit of holiday time in there. So his days with us are numbered, but his impact will be long-lasting. And just really grateful, Walter, to you for all you've done and all you've contributed. And I did want to flag for council, this is not the typical time where the chief would be in front of you, but we wanted to give him one last chart opportunity before he left. And I also, just because I have the mic and I thought I'd also flag that the chief has a milestone birthday this week. To add to all the other things going on. So really lots to celebrate and congratulate him for. So thanks. You'll be missed.
Thank you very much, Sally. Thank you for that. Bus, Walter, speaking of affordable transport, thank you. I know it's hard to believe it's 50. It looks pretty good for a 50-year-old milestone. Oh, dear.
Have you ever had a council sing happy birthday to you? No.
No, we don't. That's one for the books. I'm honored.
There you go.
Oh, you got me.
Well, I'm going to echo all my colleagues here, and on behalf of the community, thank you. Thank you for your service, your career, but especially the highlight of your career for us has been the last 4.5 years, and we appreciate all that you've done. Will you be staying in the valley?
Absolutely, we're
fantastic.
We'll take the fall or the winter and see where the world goes.
So our fire services loss is still our community's gain. So thank you very much, and appreciate your coming today.
Thank you very much.
And happy holidays to both of you and to the entire department.
Yes. Thank you very much, Council. I really appreciate it. It's been an honor.
Thank you. I'm going to call a quick break here. Actually, let's take 12 minutes. Councillor Graham, are you going to be able to continue, or do you need to sign off?
Yeah, I think I'm going to sign off on this one. I'm fading super fast here, so.
All right. Wishing you well, and please get better. And for the rest of us, we'll see you back in. Let's come back at 25 after.
Yeah, take
Sounds
care,
good.
Wade. Take care.
Thanks.
All right, calling the meeting back to order. Welcome back, everyone. And Ms. McClett, welcome to the Committee of the Whole, and we're very pleased to hear from you via Zoom. The mic is yours for the White Mountain Pilot Project Report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Krauser and members of council. So I'm just here to bring a report back on the White Mountain Pilot Project. They were approved earlier this year to run an e-bike tour, guided tour, from Banff into Canmore. And we're asked in the Memorandum of Understanding to provide council with some statistics based on that pilot project. As we know, e-bikes are becoming more and more prevalent in the valley and currently are one of the few motorized vehicles that can operate on our trail system under our current bylaws. So they ran the tour from July up until the 7th of October. During that time, they made 15 trips, which is kind of a low ridership. They anticipate that that is because of the lack of international tourists to the Bow Valley. As you can see in the staff report, most of them were Canada-based, lots of Ontario, and a few when the restrictions reduced or were lowered from the States. I think there was 3 or 4 in there. Overall, we checked in with our various ports of entry into the town, being bylaw, front desk facilities, streets and roads, public works, to see if we got any complaints around e-bike tour usage, and no complaints were received by the town during that period of time related to e-bike tour operations or e-bikes in general on there. We don't have any estimation of money spent. They had about 30 minutes in town post their tour, but no data was tracked on if people went out and spent money during that time period. So it's a maybe a bit of a disappointing season for them for their first stab at the process of offering e-bike tours from Banff into Canmore. And they're hoping that we will support another extension of their pilot project in a more normalized year, although it's hard to talk about a normalized year in our current COVID restrictions and environment. But that is the gist of the report to council today. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Well, thank you for that presentation, and it certainly sounded like there was no causes for concern that arose. I hope that if they do this next year, will still be no causes for concern, but rather will be a little bit busier for them, perhaps. Yeah. Councillor Ma.
Thanks for presentation, Eleanor. Quick question: has there been any interest in the other e-bike providers wanting to offer something similar to White Mountain for this upcoming season?
So we have numerous requests that come in every year for various motorized vehicles, be it scooters, segways, e-bikes. We have a number of rental companies that rent e-bikes. We have only White Mountain that we're aware of that offer tours. Mm-hmm. And then there's other requests. So we deal with them currently on a case-by-case basis. Currently, our bylaws don't allow for segways or scooters. That would require a shift in our bylaw or piloting process. There is a conversation scheduled or being scheduled in early next year to kind of discuss this at a more in-depth level, because we are seeing more of this come to the forefront. So being more proactive rather than reactive in how we're looking at this, or how we can mitigate what we're seeing as a growth in requests.
Okay, great, thanks. Just curious if there's other people wanting to get in on this sort of venture. Sure.
Ms. McClett, would you say that you're happy with the process that was used, even though it was underwhelming as far as the actual business for White Mountain? Would you want to continue to go this route with other providers? Because my understanding was they actually didn't have to, but hats off to them for for showing the courtesy and approaching the town to discuss this matter.
Correct. Under our current bylaw, indeed, e-bikes don't have to, they could have operated under a normal business licensing requirement. It does help us to understand what types of tours are operating on our town trails and knowing where we need to mitigate or maybe work with providers to look at alternative ways so that you're not convoluting usage. Am I pleased with the process? I think as we want to move towards regenerative tourism and a more sustainable model, having these types of tours fits within that profile. And if so, then we need to create a framework in which we can approve business ventures in a timely manner. And so I would say we have some work to do in making it easier to promote a more sustainable tour operator in their usage of our systems. So I think we're moving in the right way. I think we can do better in just having a clear framework to say when are we saying yes and when do we say no, and what do we base that on.
I would just to pursue that a little bit further. I see this as either moving intentionally towards a licensing system so that somebody has to get a license and engage with the town, or just simply establishing rules and expect that all residences and businesses and visitors will abide by those rules, which of course then would have to be enforced. Do you have any opinion as to which way would be better to go?
I have lots of opinions. What I think when it comes down to e-bikes, they fit within our bikes. We've for years allowed bike tours to operate in our valley. E-bikes are just a little bit motorized and then become more accessible for those who might not be able to ride a conventional bike. I would say that a permitting system, when it comes down to other usage, like scooters or segways, there should be a permitting system attached to that, because it might be a bit more invasive. And we're then dealing with provincial laws as well, not just municipal laws.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm just sensing that it does probably have to move one way or the other, because unless it's required that a company comes and speaks to the town, then we'll have some doing one thing and others doing another thing. So we probably need to be more clear whether they have to or not. So I just leave that. Any questions from council? Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time and wishing you all the best for the holidays.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
All right, moving on to item E1, councillor updates. Now, the way I'd like to approach this is for the written reports provided, I'm going to assume that everybody's read them, and I'll just go through each member of council and just see if there's any questions with respect to their report. Where there is no report, I will be asking if there's any verbal update that's going to be given. So with that, on my report there, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none. And Councillor Faubert, any questions of Councillor Faubert? I had one comment. I think it would be a good idea to have SEWA present to this council. And so, I would encourage you to see who might be available, and then have a request being put to the CAO so they can go to the council or the Agenda Review Committee for a future CAL meeting. So thanks for that suggestion. Oh, Councillor Faubert.
Excellent news. The representative lives nearby.
Okay. Any other question of Councillor Faubert? Seeing none. The next one is Councillor Graham. He did not provide a report and he's no longer on the call. So hopefully for the next meeting there will be. Oh, Councillor Ma, did you have a question? Oh, okay. Hopefully for next meeting, Councillor Graham will be able to provide a written report. Okay, Councillor Hillstad. Any questions of Councillor Hillstad? Okay. Councillor Ma.
This is a great report there, Jeffrey. Quick question for Canmore rental statistics for 2021. Where do you guys get that from? Is that like Pika, Assets West, Kijiji, a conglomerate? Yeah.
Oh. Okay, you can answer.
Yes.
All the above. Okay, great.
Basically, so these reports come directly from CCH. They package the reports. I just put them into here and tidy them up a little bit if there's any. I just make it look a little nicer in some spots and just tidy up the language. But yeah, so basically when it comes to that, yeah, it's exactly that. It's through basically any rentals that they can find, the major ones through the those major companies that do rentals. That's the main spot we get the statistics for the rentals. I don't think we comb Facebook groups and things like that for them, but yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Councillor Hillstad? Seeing none. For Councillor Ma. Councillor Ma, under 5C, you say the group is currently looking for a de facto member from the Stony Nakota. What do you mean by de facto member?
When we were talking at IRC, they thought that would be great too, because a lot of what they're doing has impact. There's been interest expressed to try and find a member from Indigenous groups to represent, to be also on the board as well. So.
Okay. So just
yeah.
finding somebody.
Just trying to find someone.
Somebody
Yeah.
from Stony Nakota.
Yeah,
Okay.
essentially.
Okay. Any other questions for Councillor Ma? Great drawing, by the way.
The resemblance is uncanny. My wandering eyeball.
Right. Councillor Mara, did you have any report to provide today? I see there's no written report, and it was also referenced in Councillor McCallum's referring to you for the Bow Valley Regional Housing, so I was especially wondering if you had an update.
Thank you, Mayor Councillor. I did originally put a report, but it's stuck in the sent of my computer. That's why I don't have a computer here. Okay. But I have, most of my committees did not meet, and Councillor Ma has addressed the library and our Waste Management Commission, so further to that, I have no updates. So.
Okay, nothing from Bow Valley Regional Housing then? Okay. So hopefully next time we won't get stuck in the sent.
Well, yes, IT will hopefully fix. I have 2 sent boxes for some reason in my computer. I know it's sent and sent.
And any questions for Councillor McCallum? Her written report was added. Seeing none, we will now move to the administrative updates. Okay, and what I'll do here is go through each section and ring in if you would have a question to ask in that section. So, first of all, with regards to the CAO's office, Section A, any questions there? Seeing none, moving down to municipal services. Any questions whatsoever under municipal services? Councillor Faubert.
Thank you. Under Community Social Development, C, the provincial permission to allocate 2020-2021 wage surplus dollars. I apologize. What would that be? Is it just kind of like a unspent money in one year and you need permission to spend it in the next? And is this a wages in the Family Resource Network? Is that, so how does that work when we top them up?
Yeah, so this would be due to a vacancy.
Okay.
Right, when we had staff who are not all the positions are filled. We don't spend all of the budgeted money. So that portion of the wage, we're allowed to add on to the future year. So what that could mean is that it decreases the town's top-up portion in the next budget, right, if the positions all stay in. It also depends on how you hire, the rate you hire someone in at, that kind of thing. But basically, because of the requirements of the reporting for the Family Resource Network, any monies not spent requires permission from the province to move into the future year. And this just means there was a vacancy and the province is allowing us to keep that money and spend it in the next year, which is not always a guarantee.
Yeah, okay. Good news for
Yeah, really good news.
Family Resource Network. Awesome. I had another question on protective services.
Please proceed.
So this was the emergency management exercise, and we were all in Edmonton, but Councillor Hillstad was here. Is there like a learning lesson in that? Should there always be a member of council present in town at any given time?
That's a good question. I mean, technically, you do need the mayor or a deputy to sign a state of local emergency. I mean, I think the likelihood that you'll all be away, and I think we could, in a real, true emergency, some of you would probably work to get back, or I think we could find a workaround. It's so rare, right, that you're all away. It would really just be, AUMA is probably the only, like, everyone goes to the FCM or, yeah. Anyway, so, I mean, maybe. We have a new manager of protective services starting in the new year, so that's something in the emergency management committee. We'll be meeting with her fairly early on. It's something we could discuss if it's something that we want to look at. I'm not super worried about it, but, you know, I mean, we could, it's a question of odds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know.
Yeah, none of us would want to forge the mayor's signature on something like that. We need to figure it out, but.
We live in a place
We live in
with
an
dynamic.
electronic age.
Yeah, there's got to be a way. We could make it happen.
I would think that it
Yeah.
wouldn't even need to be somebody physically present. You'd be in touch.
There's ways.
Yeah.
DocuSign, yeah. Physically present. yeah.
I know, I just like, it was a question that occurred to me, that we, like, 6 of us were completely outside of this ability to be present for an emergency.
The thing that was challenging in an electronic time, and we did, right, is that if our connectivity is lost,
Yeah.
which is the bigger risk,
happen.
probably. But again, I think the odds of both happening, all of you being away and no connectivity, are so low that it's a risk we can live with for the time being. And Councillor Hillstead did a great job.
Councillor Hillstad, did you have a question?
I was just going to say that, you know, maybe we can revive the good old fax, worst case, right? But that's, you know, so somebody's got to have a fax machine out there. We can get it done, so.
Under this section, I was just wanting to note that I appreciated the organic nature of the document, that 5D actually gave an update on 5C. So. Well, there's probably going to be 3 more updates to that before. Yeah. Something's going to happen. All right, moving on to corporate services. Any questions? Councillor Hillstead?
Just more correction, just it says 300,000 records, just a 0 got added, obviously. It's because the comma's in the right spot, it's just, you know, a trailing extra 0. So it's just 30,000 records. Still a lot. Still a lot of records. Kind of, it probably feels like 300,000. Yeah.
Okay. All right, any other questions for C? Moving to D, municipal infrastructure. Councillor Mera.
Thank you. I have a question under D3, I guess it would be B. It's just regarding the public bathrooms. They say that the downtown public washrooms will remain open throughout the year. because the other ones are closed for the season. How many bathrooms are downtown, just the Civic Center and the bus hub? And are they open like Monday to Sunday, like 7 days a week? I'm just looking at hours because that's been a question I've been asked like several times in the last week.
Yes, there is always lots of questions about bathrooms. So yes,
Yes.
the two downtown locations are the Civic Center and the old VIC, or what's now the Economic Development Department building across the street. This building, the washrooms are just open when the building is open. So Monday to Friday, that's our business hours, and then on the weekends, it's the museum hours. So those washrooms are available when the museum is open, which I believe is like 10 to 4 or 10 to 5, so shorter than a typical work week day. The buildings across the way are open until 8 p.m., so a bit longer, and that is 7 days a week.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to, let's see. Actually, I have a question with regards to, under E, sustainability, or I guess, what's the number?
4.
4E, sustainability. I'm looking for a little bit of clarity around sorry, I'm having trouble, just left my screen. Around that circular cities and regions initiative. So it says, as part of Canwar's participation in that, what is our formal participation? I remember from the October 5th regular council meeting, council defeated the motion to become a signatory. And was it dealt with at another time, or where are we at?
Yeah, great question, and I can see how that's confusing. So that October meeting that you referred to was actually a different organization, and that was a request that the mayor and council sign on as a signatory, as one of the leading cities of a different but similarly related Circular Cities initiative. This is a staff got approached to be part of a pilot program for a Circular Cities initiative that from a different organization, but a very similar concept. So staff, that came directly to staff as part of our sustainability efforts, just as a trial and as a training to see what may or may not be possible and whether or not there may or may not be a fit. So same concept, different approach. The one in October was through council. This was an invitation directly to staff to participate. So this is about that staff presentation or staff participation, and we can request that there will be some follow-up with council once this training occurs to let council know what's happening and the status of things and if there's a next step.
Great, thank you. That provides the clarity needed. Thank you. I had another question going up actually to 4A. With the mountain pine beetle burnings. I know that up in Silvertip there were a couple residents at least that were concerned about smoke and whatnot, and I know that there was a variety of causes. None of them were municipal.
Right.
I'm just wondering if that has settled down, and I know that there was going to be some action taken to just make sure people were aware of effect it was having on some residents.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything further, which is making me think it has settled down. There were 3 different projects happening up there. One was related to development and then some provincial burning. I just happen to know anecdotally, because that's my backyard and I am up there quite a bit, that there appears to be a lot less activity and less burning happening at this time. So, but I can't confirm officially if that's what happened. That's my passerby observation.
Great. Thank you. And are there any other questions of the administrative updates? Seeing none, is there any questions or comments around the council resolution action list? Seeing none, double checking here, it looks like we're done our agenda, and therefore I move that we adjourn this meeting and that we all have the very best happy holidays that we can, and these COVID times. So all those in favor? Carried unanimously.